Right, so today we are testing the RX 6900 XT in Hogwarts Legacy. Now this will be my last Hogwarts Legacy video in some time, unless they address some of the stuttering issues, then I'll make a follow-up video. But we'll be testing at 1080p, 1440p and 4K. I know 1080p testing on an RX 6900 XT is a little bit excessive because we are more prone to be CPU bound, but I just wanted to get a baseline number. So this is a 1080p Ultra. And no upscaling. This is native resolution, no ray tracing, and as I said, the Ultra preset. So we'll just be running around the Hogwarts grounds here and go into Hogwarts where the stuttering is quite immense. But as you can see there from our GPU usage in the top left hand corner there, we do drop down to about 60% GPU usage. It's not ideal, but we are still getting pretty high frame rates. I mean, in this area we almost saw 200 frames per second. So overall the performance is good, but you'd expect that from a 6900 XT at 1080p. We are also pairing this with a 12700K CPU and 32 gigabytes of DDR4 3600 CL18 memory. Now, just two things that I want to point out here. Just look at the VRAM usage. It's sitting at 10 gig at the moment, so that's allocated. That's not true usage, but we have seen that 8 gig cards do run out of VRAM when ray tracing is enabled. And then the other thing is just look at the system memory usage. We are currently using almost 19 gigabytes of memory. The other frustrating thing about this game is that it's only playable in windowed mode, so it takes your desktop resolution to apply in game, and you can't change it. You can change it with downscaling, but the performance is not the same. I just tested it now before I recorded this video. If I set my desktop resolution to 4K and I set the internal render resolution in the game to 1080p, we lose about 20% performance. So we have to restart about 6 times just for a single benchmark run, but so it goes. Alright, so we just got our baseline number here. This is a 1080p Ultra, as I said. We've got an average of 123 frames per second. Our 1% lows are sitting at 64, and our 0.1% lows are sitting at 41. Now, that 1% lows and the 0.1% lows are just good indicators of the stuttering that happens in this game. Alright, now let's see what happens at 1440p. Alright, we're now at 1440p, 100% render resolution. These are the rest of my settings. It goes a bit quick, but I've noticed that if you disable these post-processing effects, you can gain about 10 to 20 frames per second. We've got TAA on high, and then we'll be starting off on the medium preset at 1440p. Now, just looking at this exact spot here, the frame rate actually did not change that much going from 1080p to 1440p, but keep in mind we were at 1080p Ultra on the previous run, and now we're at 1440p medium. The GPU usage still goes down below 95%, and that would indicate a CPU bottleneck. Now, that's to be expected. Even though it's a 12700K, it's not overclocked, and the RAM is pretty average, 3600 megahertz CL18. Not the fastest, but I think it's more commonly used, and that's why I use it in my videos. But I think the real test would be once we get inside the castle here. Just keep an eye on the GPU usage there. Already it drops down to 80%, and a pretty big stutter there, another big stutter there, and I know that the stuttering is annoying. So far I haven't seen it to be game breaking. Actually, it's immersion breaking, but this being a slower paced game, I mean, the wand combat is pretty great. I thought I wouldn't enjoy the wand combat, but it's actually very well done. But during those scenes, I didn't really notice much stuttering, but the stuttering is definitely still an issue. Alright, so at 1440p medium, we've got an average of 130 frames per second, 1% lows of 71, and 0.1% lows of 48. It's quite funny to see that the performance is pretty much the same, even down to the 1% and 0.1% low numbers than what we had at 1080p Ultra. Alright, let's see what happens at 1440p high. Alright, we're now at 1440p high, and we are getting about 90 frames per second in this area. It's not the highest frame rate, but you do not need a very high refresh rate experience to be able to fully enjoy this game. I'd say 60 frames per second is fine. Obviously, you'd want a bit more with a higher end graphics card like the 6900 XT. but it is what it is. So you'll see some videos out there. I saw quite a few Harry Potter, well, not Harry Potter, Hogwarts Legacy benchmark videos yesterday, where people benchmark the starting area and then they claim that the game doesn't have performance issues. Now, to those people, I just say that just wait until you get to Hogwarts. It is an entirely different story once you get to this area. Hogsmeade is a different beast on its own. There's quite a lot of NPCs there, so the AI takes its toll on the CPU, and the stuttering becomes even worse there. Alright, so at 1440p high, we got an average of 105 frames per second. 1% lows are sitting at 62, and 0.1% lows, they were sitting at 38 and they crept up to 44. But once again, those 0.1% low numbers seem to be pretty consistent throughout all our tests here. And so it just means that it doesn't matter what setting you're running at, you will see stuttering. This is actually the preset that I personally play on. I've played quite a few hours in this game. It's a very enjoyable game, and I play with these settings because I can get an above 80 frames per second experience at all time. Alright, so let's see what happens on the Ultra preset. Right, we're now on the Ultra preset at 1440p, and I just want you to keep an eye on the VRAM usage there. It might not happen now, but I've actually seen it creep up to about 13 gigabytes at 1440p, and our DDR4 is still sitting at about 18 gigabytes, which seems a bit high. Maybe there is a memory leak in this game, or maybe this is just the norm for games going forward. So this would indicate that 16 gigabytes just isn't enough nowadays. So just going into the castle here, on the higher settings, the stuttering does seem to be a bit less, just because our frame rate is lower. So when it drops from 70 to 30, it's less noticeable than when we drop from 150 to 30, for example. It's still noticeable, don't get me wrong. I'm playing with the controller, so I do feel it mitigates it a bit, just because it does not translate to the user experience that much compared to using a keyboard and a mouse. But as you can see, we are maintaining a constant above 60 frames per second experience here at 1440p Ultra. So for those of you who are wondering about the GPU power draw, I have a slight undervolt and a slight power reduction on this GPU. Its power has been limited by about 10%, and then I undervolted by about 75 millivolts. Now I did run a few benchmarks before and after, and the performance is identical to stock, but I do have a lower temperature, about 10 degrees and lower. We are going through a heat wave here in South Africa, so the temperatures are a bit high in the room that I'm recording in. Alright, so at 1440p Ultra, we've got an average of 81 frames per second, 1% low sitting at 58, and 0.1% lows are sitting at 42. Once again, that 0.1% low number seems pretty consistent throughout all our tests. Alright, now it's time for me to restart the game and go into 4K. Alright, we're back at 4K and the game just crashed. That's just lovely. Alright, so we're back after our crash. We're at 4K native and the low quality preset. Now let's just start our benchmark run here. I just want to clear the numbers there. So it seems like we can get a 60 frames per second experience at all times at 4K if you use the low preset. Remember, this is without FSR. Just look at the frame time graph there. That seems a bit inconsistent just compared to our previous runs. Memory usage has come down a bit, even though we're at a higher resolution, we're at a lower quality preset. One thing that I did notice about this game as well is that if you go into the menu and come back into the game, your frame rate might be a bit lower. Like I noticed it up to about 10 frames per second lower. Then you just go back into the menu and go back into the game and it's fine again. Alright, so over here we're still getting a high frame rate. These two, they actually beat each other up. Anyway, the stuttering does seem to be a bit less at 4K. The frame time graph does show quite a bit of a frame time deviation, but I think it's just because we are now so fully GPU bound that the CPU's got some breathing room. But as soon as you get to more vegetated areas, you can see that the frame time graph does become quite inconsistent. Those are micro stutters. I don't really feel it or see it in the screen, but the game obviously does slow down when it comes to frame rendering. Alright, so there we have it. We've got our average of 76 frames per second, our 1% lows are sitting at 51, and once again our 0.1% lows are sitting at 44. Alright, let's try the medium preset. Right, we're now on the medium preset at 4K, and we are still maintaining that 60 frames per second, which is pretty good. There is some additional stuttering happening now, even though it's maybe not shown as accurately in the frame time graph. I do feel it. Not sure what that's all about. I do have Radeon anti-lag enabled as well. I tested it with and without, and it doesn't really make a difference, but the stuttering does seem to be a little bit more pronounced now on 4K medium. There's not a big performance difference between low and medium, so if you are planning to play this game at 4K, medium is definitely doable. I'd prefer medium over low, but those stutters are just those are just annoying. I know I said earlier that those aren't really game breaking, but they seem to be more pronounced and more frequent now at 4K medium. So definitely not ideal. Once again, this is with the pre-release copy of the game. Hopefully there's a day one patch, but let's see by the time the game actually releases whether there's a patch that might address some of these issues. You can actually see that the gameplay is very inconsistent. So I'll take it back, maybe just play on low if you want to play at 4K. Alright, so there we have it. Our average was 69, our 1% lows are sitting at 48, and our 0.1% lows are sitting at 39. And you can see that the textures take quite a long time to load in. I just switched to high, and the stuttering is a lot worse. Just resetting our numbers here. So one thing I just want to point out, I saw a video yesterday. I'd already spoken about benchmark runs being run in the prologue, but this guy is saying that oh, this game has got no problems. I'm getting 200 frames per second on 4090, whatever. Sure, you should be getting 200 frames per second on a 4090, but you should be getting 200 frames per second on a 4090 most of the time. With the RX 6600 XT, I was getting 160 frames per second in that particular area, so that's definitely nothing to write home about. Right, it's actually quite strange that with our previous runs, inside the stuttering would be a lot worse than outside. Outside the stuttering is worse now on high, but a lot less inside. And you can see here that the moment we step outside, the stuttering just starts. Now this is not a VRAM issue yet. We are only allocating about 11 gigs of 16 gig to this game. Our system memory is also sitting at around 17 gig. So not entirely sure what is causing this tremendous stuttering here. I don't know, maybe it's just a bug on my game with my system. If you've got a 6900 XT and it doesn't happen with your system, let me know in the comments below. Alright, so that was it for our 4K high. We failed to get a constant 60 frames per second, even though the average shows 61. The game is actually unplayable with the stuttering at the moment, so 4K low seems to be the better bet here. Don't know what the cause is, but we've got an average of 60 frames per second. Our 1% lows are sitting at 38, and our 0.1% lows are sitting at 34. Alright, let's just try the Ultra preset. I'm going to reload my save. Maybe that'll fix some of the stuttering. Let's see. Alright, we're now at 4K Ultra, and maybe reloading the save resolved some of the Nope. It did not. Right, so we are still stuttering quite a lot here. This is very, very annoying. You shouldn't be playing on the Ultra preset anyway, not at these resolutions. It's just unnecessary. The game looks plenty good enough at high. Even medium looks okay, so Ultra is just a bit excessive. The stuttering is very, very annoying. I mean, this makes the game really unplayable. Maybe I'll just restart the system. Hopefully it fixes it. Don't think it would, but I mean, it's definitely worth a shot. But first we just need to see what FSR can do for us at these settings. Alright, so we're still on the Ultra preset here. Now I've just got a FSR setting at quality, so we are now rendering at 1440p. And if you're wondering why I didn't enable FSR on our previous runs, I aim to give you the settings that'll give you a 60 frames per second experience here. And I just think that at the lower resolutions, we got more than 60 frames per second. Doesn't matter what settings we used. So FSR wasn't needed in my opinion. You can obviously enable FSR if you want to gain some performance, but it's really not needed for this type of game. So the stuttering seems to have decreased a bit. I did notice quite a few stutters outside still, even though we are now rendering at 1440p and then upscaling to 4K. They're still there, but maybe not as prominent or frequent as previously. So if you do plan on playing on 4K Ultra, then FSR Quality is the way to go. Alright, that's going to be it for our normal rasterization tests. Now it's time to test the ray tracing. Alright, we're back at 1080p. All the settings are the same, and we are running on the Ultra preset now. I've just enabled all the ray tracing options, and ray tracing quality is set to medium. Alright, so I restarted my system, did a few runs. The stuttering is still there, not ideal. Alright, so we're getting about 60, well, we're getting above 60 frames per second here. This is at native 1080p, no upscaling. It does dip below 60 every now and again. Now, once again, you just need to manage your expectations. Wow, these reflections look pretty okay, but they seem to introduce quite a lot of stuttering as well. As I was saying, you need to manage your expectations, because Radeon's first iteration of ray tracing was not that great, so you can't really expect a lot of a ray tracing performance, but that's where FSR comes in. There just seems to be quite a lot of artifacting with the lighting, especially with the shadows and reflections. They're pretty strange, but anyway, once again, just have a look at the VRAM allocated there. It's about 13 gig, and this is at 1080p. We are not getting our 60 frames per second here, but I mean, the game looks pretty good, except for the weird lighting and shadow artifacts that we just saw on the suit of armors there. And I mean, you shouldn't really be playing this game at 1080p with RX 6900 XT, but this is pretty much the performance that you can expect at native resolution. Now let's just see what happens once we enable FSR. So I'm just going to go for FSR quality. Anything lower than this at 1080p will just be a waste. If performance is what you're after, then just disable ray tracing. So we gained a few frames per second there. It's still very inconsistent. It goes up to 100, then it drops down to the mid 60s. So performance is definitely not consistent, but it is playable. I think if you just lock it at 60 frames per second with these settings, you should be fine, even though inside we are still seeing it drop below 60 frames per second. I'm also not the biggest advocate of ray tracing. I just don't think that currently the performance hit is worth it. Sure, this is a Radeon GPU. The ray tracing performance is lacking, but even on a 3080 that I used in my main system, I just never used ray tracing. Alright, but there you have it. If you want to run ray tracing at 1080p with an RX 6900 XT, it's just best to enable FSR quality, and you'll get an average of 68 frames per second, 1% lows sitting at 45, and 0.1% lows are sitting at 33. Once again, those are stutters. Alright, let's see what happens at 1440p. Alright, we're now at 1440p medium with the ray tracing options all set to on, and ray tracing quality is set to medium as well. And I actually did restart my system again just before I started running this test, and you can see that the stuttering is still present. So for this, the performance doesn't seem to be terrible. The average performance, that is, the stuttering is definitely still terrible. We are maintaining almost 60 frames per second until we hit these heavy reflections here, but the performance does seem to smooth out a bit. The funky reflections slash shadows are still present at 1440p even. Not sure what that's about. But outside we are not able to maintain a solid 60 frames per second here, but that'll be fixed with FSR, and FSR Quality at 1440p is definitely usable. Another thing I'm not a big fan of is FSR or any upscaling at 1080p. It just makes the game look a bit more fuzzy. But if you enable FSR at 1440p and you render internally at 1080p, then it still looks fine. You can see that the stuttering is pretty bad, but oh well, so it goes. Alright, so we had an average of 65 frames per second. Don't let that fool you. 1% lows of 37 and pretty dismal 0.1% lows of 23. Let's try the high preset. And once again, the textures take forever to load in. Remember, this card does have 16 gigabytes of VRAM, so the VRAM at the moment shouldn't be an issue. But it does seem like not everything has loaded in yet. Might take some more time. But you can see that the stuttering is pretty bad. We didn't really drop too much performance going from medium to high. We dropped about 5 to 10 frames per second. Now, percentage-wise, that's quite a lot. But when it comes to game experience, it's not that bad. I wouldn't play like this. As I said, my aim would be for 60 frames per second, and that's the minimum that I'd be happy with playing this game. I'm just going to make this benchmark run a bit shorter going from here on out because we've still got a lot of settings to go through. So there we have it at 1440p high with ray tracing enabled. We've got an average of 57 frames per second. Our 1% lows are sitting at 35 and our 0.1% lows are sitting at 27. The stuttering is still pretty irritating. Alright, we're now on the ultra preset and slowly the level is loading. Funny enough, we are still within that 40 to 50 frames per second here. So not that big a change going even from medium to ultra. The stuttering increased quite considerably though, which is not ideal. But just look at our VRAM usage there again. It's sitting at 13 gig. And the stuttering on the ultra preset is just making this completely unplayable. So now even inside we are getting much lower frame rates than previously. Well, when we entered, we saw the frame rate drop below 60 even. There we go, 54. And these are really violent suits of armor. So just because our benchmark run is a bit shorter at that specific scene over there actually pushes our average up. So that's not really what you can expect if you play with these settings with a system similar to this. I'd say you'd look at more like a 45 to 50 frames per second average if you are lucky. The 1% lows and the 0.1% lows are pretty dismal once again. But let's go back to the high preset and see what we can do with FSR. Alright, so we're at 1440p high preset now, still with the ray traced settings enabled and FSR quality, and it boosted our frame rate quite a lot. Now we also don't see as many stutters, so I think if you've got an RX 6900 XT, then 1440p high with FSR quality is the way to go if you want to play with ray tracing. Inside, once again, it does drop quite a bit, but I mean, that's just and the game crashed again. Alright, so as I was saying before I was rudely interrupted, if you want to play this game with ray tracing at 1440p, just use the high preset and enable FSR. Hopefully your game won't crash like mine. Now we're at 4K, we're on the medium preset again. I think it's medium, let's just make sure. There is a lot of stuttering now. Ray tracing is still enabled, so we're on the medium preset and native resolution with ray tracing enabled. Alright, let's just see if we can complete a benchmark run without the game crashing. But it does seem strange that the moment we go to 4K, the stuttering is just really terrible. I mean, we're not running out of system memory, we're not running out of VRAM, so not sure what's happening here. Alright, I'm just going to make these runs from here on short as well, just because the stuttering is really annoying, and I don't think you should be playing with these settings if this is the experience. Maybe it's just my system. It was fine last night when I made other videos, so not sure what's causing this, but maybe I'll just wait for the day one patch to see if it improves things. Alright, so at 4K low with, 4K medium with ray tracing on medium, this is pretty much what you can expect. This is a bit unplayable. Even if the stuttering is only limited to my system, the frame rate, the average frame rate is still very low. I mean, it's not even 30 frames per second, so just avoid 4K with ray tracing in native. Alright, so I just want to show you how much VRAM this game can actually use. I'm just going to leave the RT on medium, and then we'll use the Ultra preset. I just want to show you what the VRAM usage looks like. Right, we're on the Ultra preset now, and funny enough, we are still getting around 20 frames per second, pretty much the same as what we had on 4K low. Now just look at the VRAM there, it's already creeping up to 14 gig. This is actually true even at 1440p. Ray tracing seems to be quite VRAM intensive in this title, so that's why you'll see a lot of reports of 3070s, even 3080s running out of VRAM at usually playable settings in other games. And unfortunately, upscaling does not help. I tested this with the 6600 XT. I did a video on it, and the moment we start running out of VRAM, even if you use FSR Ultra Performance, it does help a bit for a few minutes, and then you just run out of VRAM again. There you can see we're almost at 15 gigabytes of VRAM. Now this is a 16 gigabyte card, and I just think it's a little bit unnecessary. There aren't many cards that have more than 16 gigabytes of VRAM, so not sure what the goal here is. But as you can see, this is definitely not a playable experience. So what I'm going to do is I'll just use FSR performance, see if we can get close to 60. I highly doubt it, but let's see what happens. Alright, so I tried a few FSR presets, and performance is actually the only one that'll give us close to 60 frames per second. And now you can see that the stuttering is gone. Well, not completely, but it's definitely not as frequent as it was previously. And maybe I spoke too soon. But you can see even with FSR performance, we are not always locked at 60 frames per second. So even if you do limit your frame rate to 60, you will still see some drops. Once again, that's just ray tracing for you. I mean, it is very demanding, and I think the performance hit is just not worth it, but that's just my opinion. Sure, the reflections look nice, the lighting looks good, and the game just crashed once again. Alright, so on that note, I'm just going to stop the recording. It was a little bit disappointing. It's the first time I saw the game crash, so sorry I couldn't complete my full benchmark run, but it just seems that the game does have some issues to sort out. Alright, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and as always, we hope to see you in the next one.